So, if you had prosopagnosia, would you know who I am right now? The autobiographical memory will work in YouTube and you'll be able to see it today as opposed to the last time that I tried to do this. So where were we? Chapter 7 on autobiographical memory. Now, there's one researcher that we're going to talk about in terms of how we're categorizing autobiographical memory, but I don't want you to think that it's the only way that we categorize autobiographical memory, because there are a lot of different researchers that come up with a lot of different contexts for forming different categories of how we remember this blending of episodic and semantic memory related to ourselves. So remember, when you're thinking about anything involving autobiographical memory, it's tied into our concept of self, our biography of what has happened in our life. So the researcher that your textbook talks about is Martin Conway, who's a British memory researcher on autobiographical memory. And he has 3 different levels of representation of what he believes autobiographical memory can be categorized into. And his definitions are linked to the amount of time that the particular level refers to. So his first level is specific episodic memory or event-specific memory. And here we're talking about one experience, one event that has happened to you. So pick anything in your life. You can pick watching this video right now. It counts as one specific episodic memory of an event that has occurred. The second category is generalized or repeated events, which are an average or summation of the cumulative experience that you have with certain types of events. So maybe in the context of watching these videos, you've got a cumulative idea of what it'll be like to log in to my YouTube and listen to the videos for the particular lecture. Now, most of your feedback has been that the videos are good, but maybe you dread them. Maybe you're like, man, she thinks she's funny. She's not funny. This is painful to watch. One way or the other, you have some sort of general event categorization in your autobiographical memory of what happens to you when you log in and watch YouTube videos from me. Now, these general events can include extended events, or what they call mini histories, which might be an accumulation of specific events that have something about them that makes them special or stand out as these little mini histories or little mini narrative themes that happen within the scope of your general day-to-day events. So if you were looking at this semester a couple of years ago, maybe you weren't here yet, but there was a semester where we had a hurricane and we were off for like 10 days and we were going crazy preparing for that. You can use a hurricane in general in South Florida as a little mini history. So when you look back on your life, you don't tend to define your life by hurricanes, but you can certainly recall the mini histories of the ones that you've been alive for in terms of the different preparation you had to do, the types of damage that may have happened to your house and whatnot. So they fall somewhere between the next thing that we're going to talk about and this general event summation. So the third level is a lifetime period. And that can be a little bit deceiving because we're not necessarily talking about something that you've done from the time you were born until now. We're talking about the different ways that you organize themes within your life. So your lifetime period could be the course of this semester. It could be fall 2018. Maybe it was a particularly exciting semester or stressful semester, so you remember it as its own little lifetime period. It could be your entire undergraduate career. You could be looking at your entire school career from kindergarten through now. Different ways that you categorize your life. It's going to change from person to person, what's important to you and what fits in with your identity. So those are 3 categorizations by Conway, but there are different ways that we can look at this. So in my personal research, I used the autobiographical categorization of somebody named Bluck. B-L-U-C-K. And the 3 levels of block, because most of these things have 3 levels. You've seen the sort of tendency that these things follow. But Block's levels are self-related memories, which is everything that ties into your concept of self, self-esteem, self-efficacy, all those fun self-dash theories. The second being social, so your memories tied into your interactions with other people, also within the scope of your concept of self, but specifically yourself in that social environment. And then his third category is a directive category, which is yourself and the tasks that you need to do and how you get them done. So mostly now for you guys related to school, your kind of school-related activities that get you to that A at the end of the semester. But later on in life, it could be all of the things you need to do at work in order to make the paycheck to survive in Miami, which is impossible, but we still try, right? So there's different ways that you can categorize autobiographical memory. But hopping back to Conway, who is alive, has a color picture, and has YouTube videos available if you're very interested. I'm not going to say anything else. You can go listen to them yourself and form your own opinions. But Conway has this concept called the working self, which is a component of his autobiographical theory that works kind of like the central executive in Baddeley's working memory categorizations. So the working self kind of monitors what these 3 levels of memory are doing and functions in controlling and retrieving information at these different levels of representation. And the working self is responsible for these 2 different C's involved with memory. The first being coherence, which is you yielding an autobiographical memory when you're trying to recall certain events that are consistent with your working self. So your idea of who you are as a human being. Now, if you have relatively low coherence, meaning you recall a memory that has some sort of difference between how you view yourself and what the memory is presenting to you, you could end up with cognitive dissonance feelings and just general unpleasantness and sort of cognitive resources being funneled into trying to resolve the difference between what you remember and who you think you are. So you might think of yourself as this extremely charitable person, and then you recall this memory of a time where you passed somebody on the street and you didn't give them your spare change. And then when you recall that, there is some sort of difference in coherence between you as a charitable person and you who refused to give your spare change to the person on the side of the street. And then that could lead to some sort of inner struggle where you're like, end up with that guilty conscience of like, why didn't I do that? I defined myself by my acts of kindness and I did not give them my spare change. Or you could have your reasons, who knows? But that's the first C, coherence. The second C is correspondence. So correspondence is the factuality between the memory that you're recalling and what actually happened. So how truthful and how factual are the memories that you're recalling from your autobiographical memory? Or are you just lying to yourself and trying to prevent low amounts of coherence by recalling things that are just not what happened? Because you want to avoid remembering the time that you passed up the person asking for spare change. It's Miami. There's a lot of people asking for spare change. Kudos to all of you out there who are not living in Miami and don't know the struggle. So if we were going to apply this whole theory to you guys as students, so again, your episodic or event-specific memories could be the first time you ever logged into Canvas, the first time you ever watched a video, anytime you get a message from me, reading an individual chapter, whatnot. Your general events would be the routine that you've come up with to get yourself through the semester. So you know at certain times you're going to log in, you're going to do quizzes and whatnot. So our general event of class is probably a little bit different than the other courses that you're in because they're much more structured week by week. And ours more thing, but there's still some sort of routine that you develop to it. Maybe you haven't looked at anything yet. And your routine is that in December, during the first week of December, you're going to panic and you're going to do all of this then. So hello to future yous in December who haven't watched this yet. But that is your general event of one class within your semester. And then a lifetime period could be your entire semester online this semester or your entire college career at FIU and whatnot. You can apply it to a lot of different categories and concepts within your life, not just being a student. It's just the easiest one for me to talk to you about. So jumping topics now. Even though we have a whole chapter that we're dedicating to childhood and memory, talk a little bit now about the concept of childhood amnesia. And this is one of the topics from the paper that you need to do at the end of the semester that ends up being one of the more commonly written about topics. So pay attention if you plan on writing about that. But childhood amnesia refers to our non-existent or extremely poor memory of things that happened to us in childhood and infancy. So no matter how hard you try to remember being born, it's never going to happen because you can't remember it. You can't. And this doesn't mean that as children, we have insomnia. It means that as adults, we cannot recall things that happened to us extremely early on in life. So don't mistake this for this concept that there's a bunch of toddlers around that have amnesia from one second to the other. Because if you've been around small children and you ever promise them something, they remember. Oh yeah, you promise them some sort of like candy, or you're going to take them to the park, or you're going to do whatever, they remember. But if you were to ask that same person when they were 18, 20 years old, about the time when they were 3 years old and they threw a tantrum because you didn't give them a lollipop, they probably would not remember it. So we can have our first memories between 2 and 3 years of age, but usually between 3 and 4 is where we start having our very first memories, even if they do come to us in a little bit of a fragmented state, meaning they're not the strongest of memories because they're our very first ones. So around 6 to 7 is when we start having our really clear, salient memories, because that's when, according to Conway, we start using this framework of these different types of events and levels of representation. So you do have memories, or you can have memories from 2 on, but likelihood of you having them that early, not so much. And once we start getting into grade school, then we start having this better representation of memory, and we start being able to recall things better. Now, why does childhood amnesia happen? There are 4 different prominent theories of why we can't recall things that happen to us at such a young age. Now, we can recall things at a young age if they were highly traumatic or if they were extremely important to us. So they found that depending on the age difference between you and a sibling, if you're the older sibling, you can have memories. Say your sibling was born when you were 2, 3 years of age, and it was something that was highly exciting to you, and it was something that you rehearsed a lot after that because it was just an important event. Those sorts of things can trigger earlier memories than this 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-year-old theory. But that is not super, super common. So why does childhood amnesia happen? Theory number 1, psychodynamic view of Freud. Yep, we can't avoid him. Here he is rearing his ugly head again. So sorry. I don't know if his head is ugly or not. I don't really know what he looks like. Figure of speech. But here Freud is again saying that the reason why we can't remember childhood is because of repression and us repressing these sexual desires and all of the taboo things that we do when we're younger. So we're taught that they're not good. We repress them, and that's why we can't remember the entirety of our childhood. But if you go through certain levels of psychoanalysis, you can start to remember these things that happened to you a little bit earlier. Second, we have no concept of self when we are that young. And that is why we can't remember things, because remembering things is tied into our concept of self. And if we don't have one, it means we haven't encoded memories until we start considering ourselves within our environments. And younger people don't do that yet. They haven't solidified that idea. Third is that, simply put, your brain has not developed well enough at that age to be able to have these mature encoding of memory procedures. So basically, your brain is a baby, and baby brains can't remember things. So that's why we don't remember things from that early. So of those three theories, most research says that the Freudian theory is not so much. When we look at the concept of self theory, it's there could be some levels of truth to that, but it's not enough to really give reason to why this happens in general. The third, we've disproven that by studying small children, that their brains are mature enough to do these sorts of things, which we will talk about later in the semester. So of those three views, we don't really have anything solid yet proven by research that tells us why small children have experiences that we can't remember as adults. So the fourth view involves the influence of language development on memory. So basically saying that as we develop language, our memory gets stronger. And when we're young, we might have different ways of communicating, different ways of understanding things, but our language development just isn't there yet. Yes, we might start talking, but understanding the different language-related memory, the lexical memory that we talked about in the last video, it's just not there yet. So as children develop their language skills, they get better and better at memory in terms of creating strong memories and encoding memories with meaning, because we know there's particular ways that we rehearse and encode memory that makes stronger memories than others. So the connection between language development and memory can be proven by studying, very simply, the differences between females and males in terms of their development when they're younger. So if you were to study a typical female versus a typical male, biologically, typical female versus male, females develop their language skills more quickly than males do. Biological, female and males do. And this is just something that happens. And when you study their ability to recall memories, females are better at it than males are. I'm sorry, but it's one of the few times that biological, females win out here. So why is it that even after we develop our language, do we not remember things? And that's because if the language didn't exist to begin with, it's not encoded with the right cues for retrieval. Because we know retrieval cues are very important for getting to what we want to remember in our neural network. So essentially anything that happened before you developed this language wasn't encoded, and it can't be converted. It's like trying to convert or translate one thing to another from a language that doesn't exist into something that's just not compatible with it. So we essentially don't have the memories yet to recall in a way that aligns with our verbal capabilities. So that is the prominent view. Might have sounded a little confusing, but there's a slide, goes over all of it. You got this. I believe in you. So one of the topics that we've already discussed, that's another one that is one of the topics for the paper that you could possibly write about, just saying, is flashbulb memories. And where we get into more detail here is with differentiating the type of mechanism that is responsible for flashbulb memories. So there's two competing views here. One, that flashbulb memories occur because of a special mechanism that we have in our brain that is only for flashbulb memories, that we make literal representations of these original events that are traumatic or stressful or exciting, and we encode them with great detail, and that these are separate from how we encode regular memories, everyday memories, that there's two different mechanisms here. And what happens with all your other memories and what happens with flashbulbs. And then there's a second view that there's just one ordinary mechanism. Our brain processes every memory in the same way, and that they are subjective, flashbulb memories are subjective to the same encoding and retrieval process as any other memory. It's just that they have more emotions involved in this process. So which one do you think is the correct one? Write the paper about it, because that's what you're going to be arguing for. Is it a special mechanism? Is it an ordinary mechanism? Spoiler alert is that most people think it's an ordinary mechanism, and our emotions just play a pretty significant part in the recall of those types of memories. Interesting, right? You definitely want to write a paper on it. I know it. So in terms of measuring autobiographical memory, it can be hard for memory researchers to get a good feel for those types of memories because it didn't happen to them. They're extremely personal memories. And just like we talked about with visual imagery, it can be hard to describe to somebody what you're seeing or feeling in relation to things that are in the context of yourself. So nobody else can really understand something that's happened to you unless they experience it firsthand through your own, walking in your own shoes. So a good way of memory researchers tapping into autobiographical memory is through something called a diary study. So back in the day, this used to be done by physically having a diary and writing down things that happen to you on a day-to-day basis related to whatever it is that we're trying to research. Now it's become a lot more sophisticated where you can log into the internet, you can do this via email, you can do it via Qualtrics, you can do it via whatever it is. There's an application now that you can download on your phone. And as you have certain ideas or things that relate to whatever study you're trying to participate in, or just your own personal diary needs, because you are that kind of person that likes recording down what's happened to you, there are apps that can do that where you can just log in and type some stuff on your iPhone and send it off to your little recording log area of things that have happened in your life. So experimenters can get a lot more in terms of qualitative data out of studies like this, because it's a lot easier to describe things that have happened to you in words, in a narration, than to pick from a Likert scale of 1 to 7, how do you feel this is applied to you? Because the question just might not be specific enough. The question might not be relevant. The question just might not be very good at tapping into what exactly it is that we want to look at. So personally, I'm about to start a diary study on episodic memory in the workplace, where I'm going to have people log in over the course of 4 weeks and report on the types of involuntary memories that they have had over the course of their work week and related to specific work events, and especially in terms of stressful events. So they're going to log in to the diary application on their phone and they're going to type things in, and I can control the types of responses they get from them by the way that I word the questions that they're going to receive when they log in. So I will get a lot of information from that in terms of if somebody feels like elaborating on something, they can, and I'll get that back, which is a lot more specific than a regular pencil and paper scale. But the problems and the complications with diary studies become that you need somebody who's willing to participate for an extensive period of time. A diary study is not going to work over a day or two. It's going to work over a period of time. The best diary studies happen over lifetime periods. So you have to have people that come into the experiment, write down factual things in their diary, and who actually stay in the experiment from beginning to end. So there's a lot of time and effort involved on behalf of the people who are participating. So it can be hard in that context. In another context, you have to somehow break that qualitative data down into some sort of quantitative means of measuring whatever it is that you're trying to measure in a study. So you have to have a lot of people encoding things and develop a pretty strong system for breaking down something that might occur in paragraph form into something that could look like on a scale of 1 to 7. So it can get complicated, it can get expensive, and it can just get time consuming to do studies like this, but it can be very rewarding if pulled off in the correct way. So the last slide of our Chapter 7 adventure is talking about something called the Qword technique. So in terms of autobiographical memory, we can ask Q-related things about different lifetime periods. And there's something that is called the reminiscence bump in terms of autobiographical memory, which is this tendency to have a spike in memory of recall of particular events that happen from late childhood through adulthood. And the book and research talks about the age range of 16 to 25, but I think as society keeps evolving and we start doing things a little later in life, this time frame can be shifted depending on the person from 16 into your 20s, into your late 30s and whatnot. We're talking again about the general lifetime curve. Most of your extremely important things in your life that are tied into your self-narrative, graduating from high school, graduating from college, getting married, having children, they happen between these little prescribed times of this middle period of your life. So when we're asking things, if I was to ask you, so say my Qword to you, you're not in college anymore. Picture yourself at 50. I know it might be scary, but picture yourself at 50. And I was to give you the prompt of exam. And I was to ask you to think about like an important exam. You're probably going to recall things that happened to you the last time that you took exams, which was in college. So you're going to have this peak of memory during that particular time frame and not necessarily continue to recall important memories from the times right around you were 50, unless you were continuing to participate in that sort of important life-changing stuff at that age. So if I'm to ask you about love or relationships or ask you even what were the most exciting points in your life, depending on the person, most people tend to have a period where all of their really, really important self-defining things happen. And that is the reminiscence bump. So not only do we have a peak in terms of our brain's capacity around those times, but it's also this meaningfulness that happens to us at this point in our life. So in terms of autobiographical memory, we do have a specific period of time in our lives where those memories tend to be encoded the most and are the most important in terms of the events that we experience. So hopefully when I go hit end stream, this posts and goes through. And hopefully you don't completely have no idea who I am because my hair's not down. But it's hot in here. And long hair is warm, so I decided to throw it up. Deal with it. So you should now have chapters 1 through 8, and hopefully that can sustain you for a little while until I can get chapter 9 up. So I hope all is going well for you.